Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. My name is Carol Michael, and I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma.
Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. I must apologize right off the bat because I look really scrungy, because guess where I've been?
You've been in your garden.
I have. I've been working my little tail feathers off as fast as I can go.
The good news is our listeners can't see you. They can only hear the smile in your voice that you have when you've been out in the garden all day.
Yeah, it's a happy smile. A tired smile, but a happy smile.
Great. Well, today we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about butterflies and bees, blooms, and baby vegetables. Are you ready?
I am ready. I am so ready. Let's go for it.
Tell us about your bees, Dee.
My bees are excellent right now. They are building up. I started with a package last year, which is 10,000 bees, and now I have a full colony. And a lot of people don't know that the box that the bees are put in is called the hive, but the bees themselves are called a colony. So I have a full colony with a laying queen, and it doesn't get much better than that.
So how many bees are in your colony do you estimate?
Probably right now there's probably 30,000, I would say.
Wow.
And they will get up to 40 to 50,000 before the end of summer. And then they start to pare down the colony in anticipation of winter, and that's when they throw the boy bees out.
Girls only over the winter, right?
Pretty much. They sometimes let a few boys stay, but boys are basically useless except for one thing in bee world. And so if they don't do that one thing, they get to stay the summer and then they have to go. And then they make more baby boys in the spring.
So needless to say, your garden is buzzing.
My garden is buzzing. I haven't seen any of the other native pollinators yet, but I have definitely seen the honeybees. They are out and about. And I gotta apologize. I said that they were bringing in white pollen from dandelions, but that's incorrect. I read that in a book from a beekeeper, and actually that's yellow pollen. So I don't know where the white pollen was from. Maybe from plum trees, because we have Mexican plum trees that are native in the state. I don't know if those are pollinated by bees or not. I should look that up.
All right. Well, you also were telling me that the butterflies are coming.
Yeah, the butterflies are coming. The butterflies are coming. The monarchs have been down in Mexico and overwintering. And if you go to the Journey North website, which we're going to link to, they have now moved at the end of March from Texas across the Red River into Oklahoma, and then they've also moved into Mississippi and Arkansas. And so really favorable weather means more nectar sources for adults, and they're starting to lay eggs in Oklahoma. I'm a little concerned about this because maybe in southern Oklahoma the weather has been better, but in my part of Oklahoma, which is north central, it has really been cold. In fact, it got down to 27 degrees the other night. Brr. And so a lot of things that were doing really well have kind of shut up shop for a few days. But, nature knows what she's doing, so I figure it'll all work out. The good news about the monarchs is they're in higher numbers than they've been in years.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, at least in the central part of the U.S. The western band of monarchs in California really took it on the chin last year. They are not doing so well. But here's the good news. What has been happening in California, Carol?
Super bloom.
Super bloom. They have had a massive super bloom of all of their wildflowers. You know what other state is having a massive super bloom?
Oklahoma?
Texas.
Oh, Texas, yes, I saw that.
Texas is having a huge super bloom. Oklahoma's still been too cold, but it'll be interesting to see because we all got rain, right? And so when we get rain, native flowers are increasing. They even had a huge influx of painted lady butterflies that flew in California. And so that was very exciting, and that might help their monarchs too. So are we going to talk more about what we can do for monarchs?
We are. First of all, I'm going to say that here in Indiana, we actually had a snow event over the weekend. So it's been very cold, but it's starting to warm up today. But they tell us it's too soon to expect butterflies up here.
Yeah.
And oftentimes butterflies and hummingbirds show up around the same time. And we usually put feeders out for hummingbirds if you want to try to feed them around April 15th. Pay your taxes, put up your hummingbird feeder in Indiana.
Huh, interesting. People already have their hummingbird feeders up here if they feed them. I don't feed them.
I don't either.
Okay, I should put it this way. I feed them, but I feed them with plants.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to mess with that sugar water. And I used to do it way back when I was young. And what came with that sugar water? Ants.
Lots of them.
Ants. So it's just not what I like to do. But I do have a lot of hummingbirds here, a lot of hummingbird moths, all kinds of creatures because of two reasons. I plant for them, and I don't spray certain things. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that's the same thing here. I have some neighbors that have hummingbird feeders, but I prefer to put out flowers that will attract them. And I just see a lot of them around certain flowers in the summertime. And the same with the hummingbird moths. Those things are huge.
Yeah, I love them. I think they're beautiful. My goal this year is to see a Luna moth. I've never seen one in person. I saw a whole bunch of hawk moths last year, and I did a bunch of pictures and put them on Instagram, and they did really, really well on my personal page. But I want to see a Luna moth, so I'm going to plant something for them.
You know what? If you want to
What?
see one, I want to see one.
They're beautiful. They're green. They're gorgeous.
I love green.
things.
I love green things.
Yes, you do love green things. So I need to look at what I got to get for them. Anyway, go ahead.
So let's talk about flowers. And we both plant a lot of flowers and have a lot of flowers in our garden. One of the reasons is to attract pollinators. So the first thing we ought to tell people is neither one of us use insecticides in our gardens because we don't want to attract them and then kill them.
Yeah, it seems rude.
Well, it seems backwards. But we do plant a lot of flowers. So for our flower segment, let's talk about the flowers that we're planting in our gardens to attract the pollinators and give the pollinators something once they're here.
Okay. First of all, if you're trying to attract monarchs, you need to plant milkweed. And every gardener should have a patch of milkweed. And I don't, look on places like Journey North and the Monarch Watch and also the Xerces website, which we'll link to too. All of those websites give native milkweeds that you can grow in your garden. Pink swamp milkweed grows here. I'm sure it probably grows up where you live too. Unless
it does.
It's not called. Yeah. I also grow tropical milkweed, which that was a big controversy for a while because in southern Texas and other far southern states, it overwinters. And so it can cause butterflies, monarchs to get OE and pass it to each other more than usual. Now, here's the thing. In Oklahoma, it dies all the way to the ground. So every year I plant some seeds and I grow some tropical milkweed, but I also grow milkweed that is perennial. I do both. And, you just do milkweed's the first thing. But that's mostly for the babies, right? That's mostly for caterpillars. So we also need to have things for the adults. So what are some flowers you grow for adults?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is zinnias. I see tons of monarchs flitting around my zinnias in late summer.
And all kinds of butterflies.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of butterflies. So I have lots of zinnias.
That's great. I do too. I love zinnias. It's probably one of my favorite flowers. Also, the main thing about all plants for adult butterflies or bees or hummingbirds or any other creature is they need to be high nectar. And high nectar plants are what produce seed, right? So they attract the pollinator in, the pollinator comes in, and it does seed. But there's one particular surprising plant that is blooming right now in Oklahoma that no one plants on purpose, and yet it does feed a lot of bees. Long-tongued bees. What would that be?
I think I know what it is because I have it in my garden too, and it attracts a lot of bees.
Yeah, it's part of the mint family.
Henbit.
Henbit. So when my bees were flying into their hive, I looked at some of their little legs and they had red pollen on them. And so I asked some beekeepers I knew, and they sent me a pollen chart. And the pollen chart said that it was henbit. And I thought, well, I would have thought it was purple because to me it's kind of purple, but really it's really red. So henbit, so now you don't have to feel bad, dear listeners, about all the henbit in your yard.
I don't feel bad about it, although I do pull it out of the vegetable garden. But Dee,
I do too.
Back up a minute. You have a pollen chart?
I do. There are a bunch of pollen charts on Google. I can't post any of them because they aren't mine, unless I can find a source that's, open source. But several people sent them to me. They're wonderful, and they tell you what color all the pollen is.
Well, let's see if we can do some searching online and see if we can link to a pollen chart that our listeners might be interested in, because I think that's fascinating, that you can look at a bee's legs and figure out what flowers they were messing around in.
Yeah, it's exciting. And, honeybees are specialists. So certain honeybees go to certain flowers, and that's all the flowers they do until they're done with those flowers. So they're a little different than, say, some bumblebees. Some bumblebees are more generalists, and same with some butterflies as far as nectar goes. So here are some other nectar flowers that we should all grow. So, of course, we all have henbit in our yard, which we don't like. But here's the thing, guys. You don't have to use any type of herbicide on your lawn to get rid of henbit, because as soon as it turns summer and gets hot and you mow, henbit disappears. It dies.
Right.
Shrivels up. So quit worrying so much about the henbit in your yard. Go ahead and pull it out of your vegetable garden. I do that too. And my flower garden, because it wants to get everywhere. Okay, and the other thing is salvias, right? Almost all of the salvias.
Love salvias. And salvias are good for attracting hummingbirds as well.
Exactly, especially the red and pink ones. Those really attract them. And so you want those. And also zinnias, which we've already mentioned. And then there's agostachys or agastache. Depends on how you want to pronounce it.
Do you want to know how I pronounce it, Dee?
Sure.
Agastache.
Okay, whatever makes you happy. I've heard it pronounced every which way, and by professionals. So I was taught by Dan Himes to say agostachy, but you know what? Agastache makes more sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The only successful one I've grown in my garden is Bolero, that particular variety. However, I have a whole lot of luck with agostachys. Oh, it's so hard to say. I have a lot of luck with them in pots, in containers. And I put them up on my deck, and then I get visited by hummingbirds.
Oh, that's nice. I grow an agastache called Blue Fortune, and I'll tell you what, it attracts bees like crazy. And I actually have it planted in my front garden down towards the sidewalk. And especially late in the summer, it's just loaded with bees. And I think about those dog walkers and people that walk by are thinking, really? You put it here where all the bees are right there? But, bees won't bother you if you just walk on by.
Yeah, just walk on by. You could have that Dionne Warwick song in your head. The truth is, they won't bother you in the garden either unless you're right by their nest. They don't want anything to do with you. They're too busy. Also, didn't you grow a new one this year called Kudos Yellow?
Kudos Yellow. I bought that last spring. It's a hybrid, and I'm not ready to announce to the world that it's the greatest thing, because it's just the first year. And I think with perennials, you got to make sure that they come back, and they come back just as well as when they were planted and actually got bigger. So I was out looking today, and it looks like little bits of it are coming up. So I'm excited.
That's
and
good
it's a
news.
beautiful yellow. It's a beautiful yellow, a light yellow.
Mine always right in the winter. That one is put out by a company called Terra Nova, and another name for agostachy or agastache or whatever we want to call them is hummingbird mint, which tells you right away that hummingbirds like them. Another thing that is an early bloomer that we should all grow in our gardens if we can are hellebores. Hellebores help all the early pollinators because they are full of wonderful nectar.
Yes, and I have quite a few hellebores, and mine are all blooming, which reminds you of the other name for them, the common name of Lenten roses, because they always bloom early in the spring.
Right, during Lent. And then last year I planted a false vervain, and I was going to look up its, I was going to look up its botanical name and practice it, but I'm just going to give it a shot. Stachytarfata. So that's nectar wand red. I've grown all of the false vervains that I have ever had access to. They all do really well in Oklahoma. Hummingbirds love them. Butterflies love them. Bees love them. But nectar wand red, which was actually hybridized at Bustani Plant Farm, was the best. And last year I have video of it just covered with butterflies. And I'll post that to our Garden Angelus page on Instagram.
So Dee, guess what? I don't think I've ever grown a vervain.
A false vervain? You should grow one.
I'm going to. I'm going to look for it. I hope my local greenhouse has it. If not, I'm going to make her get it.
I bet they have some of them because they're quite popular. But of course, they'll be annuals for you just like they are for me, unless you take cuttings. Yes. And then in the herb section, do you want to take the herb section?
Sure. There are lots of herbs. Chives, borage, lavender come to mind, and thyme all have flowers with high nectar and make a great addition to the garden.
Yeah. And there's 2 new lavenders on the block, which lavenders are really hard to grow in Oklahoma. I don't know how they are in Indiana. Do you have better drainage?
They are, I would call them a short-lived perennial in Indiana. They really need a dry location, and you shouldn't mulch them because they like a dry location. They're from the Mediterranean, dry. So, they'll go along for a couple years, and you think you really got the whole thing figured out with lavenders, and then they'll die on you, and you go get some more.
Well, there's 2 I really like now, and one is called Super Blue, and the other one's called Phenomenal. And Super Blue has a much more delicate bloom and is a bluer color. Phenomenal is more on the purple side, but mine have really been phenomenal. Now, let me just preface that with, I grow those in my potager, and it's raised beds, and they grow up against the edge where it's really hot, and it's got really good drainage. But I'm telling you, I bought 8 more of them this spring because I like them so much.
I bought a Phenomenal last year, and I'm anxious to see how it comes back. What really impressed me was the length of the flower stems on that thing.
They're huge.
Which, they're gigantic.
Yeah. And
very
guess
tall.
what? Bees love them. Honeybees really love them. So that's a good thing.
And I put mine in sort of a dry spot between 2 chairs out in my garden. So it sounds weird, but I can sit there in the evening and I can stroke the lavender and you get that scent. And I like that.
I don't think that sounds all that weird, but then again.
But then you might have done it too, so okay.
Might have. Okay, and then from seed, another one from seed that you can grow are sunflowers. But you need to look for sunflowers that have pollen. For a long time there, they were coming out with sunflowers that were considered pollen-free because they are florist sunflowers, because people don't want to, get sunflowers in their bouquet and have pollen drop all over their table. But bees, especially honeybees and some other bees, they need pollen and nectar. Honeybees need pollen because pollen has protein, and with protein, they make baby bees. And it increases their laying ability and all of that. Nectar is all about sugar, which is energy for the hive.
So I would agree. Find the old-fashioned sunflower varieties like Mammoth comes to mind. Mm-hmm. Those are perfect. They are just loaded with pollen. So you wouldn't cut it and bring it in and set it on your table unless you want yellow pollen everywhere.
Right.
But great for the bees.
They are great for the bees. And frankly, Mammoth has such big stems, you wouldn't be cutting it to bring it inside anyway.
You'd be chopping it down with an axe.
That's right. I mean, they're about 2 inches around. Okay, and then bee balm, good old-fashioned Monarda.
You can't go wrong with that. Well, you can because it can self-sow all over your garden, but it's great for bees.
I have so much Monarda in my garden right now that I spend much of my spring with my hand hoe digging up Monarda, Rebecca, all of those ones that
Asters.
Have the lateral stems that go underground. Oh my gosh. I'm always pulling them away from everyone else.
But I did this last year. It sounds like I bought a lot of plants last year, and perhaps I did compared to the average person. But I bought a dwarf bee balm, and I'm anxious to see how those came back.
Ooh, that would be neat. A different size.
It only gets about a foot tall.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Do you know the name of it?
Heavens no.
Oh, okay. Silly me. Okay, and then you should say the next flower because you have a lawn full of them.
I have a lawn full of crocuses.
Yeah. Great early source.
Yes, and I can go out there on a sunny day like today. It's in the upper 50s and sunny. All the crocuses will be wide open, showing their pollen, trying to attract those bees. And you can just kind of sit there and look, and you'll see those bees. You don't know where they came from, because I don't have any hives around here. But they
Somebody
sure do
does.
know how to find those crocuses.
Somebody has hives around you. Bees only fly up to 3 miles away. So, honeybees, I should say.
They
So
find it.
The next one I thought of was lantana for summer because
Yes.
so many things don't bloom in Oklahoma in the middle of summer because it is super, super hot. So lantana and also Phlox paniculata. I would say those two plants are huge, huge, huge help in the middle of summer and easy to grow. Both of them easy to grow.
I'd agree.
And then finally, dandelion weeds. Dandelions are going crazy right now in my yard, and I'm okay with it because they are a great source of both pollen and nectar for bees, and they just don't bother me. Plus, they're kind of pretty, sunshiny yellow. Somebody's going to write me about that, but I think they're pretty.
You know what? I think they're nice too, and I will have a ton of dandelions in my back lawn in probably another 2 to 3 weeks. Because I don't spray anything because I have all those crocuses and Gloria the Snow and clover. And so I'll have dandelions in a couple of weeks, probably about the time I have the big Easter egg hunt at my house. We'll be hunting in the dandelions.
I love it. I love the big Easter egg hunt at your house. I have a quick story about your lawn and my lawn from Claire.
Go for it.
Okay, this is my youngest daughter, Claire, who's now 20. She came over and was looking over my shoulder the other day when I was looking at all the violets, the dogtooth violets down in the deal, and the henbit, and some other little tiny blue wildflower that I don't know. But I was standing there looking at them all, and she goes, "That's pretty." And I said, "I think it's pretty too." I said, "Did you know that most people don't think that's pretty and that they use stuff to kill in their lawn?" And she goes, "Yeah, I see the commercials." And then she stood for a minute and she goes, "Europeans think we're crazy." And I was like, "What? Where did you hear that?" Because I haven't told her that. And she goes, "Oh, I read it. Europeans think you are supposed to have weeds in your lawn. They think it's a good thing." And I go, "Yeah, they even eat some of the weeds, like dandelions." So we had this whole conversation about it, and it just made me feel so good because, hello, maybe we're becoming, a little more savoir-faire by not killing everything in our lawn but grass.
Exactly. So speaking of eating your weeds, you want to turn our attention to vegetable gardening?
I think we better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have all my spring veggies sown in the garden. Peas, radishes, spinach, lettuces, beets, and turnips. But yours are up probably.
Not everything, not the turnips because I sowed them late. But yes, everything else is up. And it was a little bit bad because my nasturtiums, which are edible, by the way, my nasturtiums got kind of frozen. I'm going to see if they come out of it.
Yeah, I planted alyssum, the annual alyssum, which I know doesn't grow well in Oklahoma, but it does nicely in the spring in Indiana. And if you plant it early enough, it usually gets through the summer okay and reblooms in the fall. It did not like the snow on it. Did not like that snow.
Yeah.
So I looked at it yesterday, and it looks a little bit unhappy, but we'll give it another week or so before we decide that we have to replant. It'll come out of it.
Right. So I think this is a good lesson for our listeners that no matter how experienced you are, you can't predict that you're going to get a low of 27. Even though we might get a freeze, and most of the time nasturtiums can handle them, a low of 27 for 12 hours is a long time.
And you can't predict that you're going to get snow cover on March the 30th. That's still, the fringes of it were still hanging around on the north side this morning, 3 days later.
Yuck.
You know what else you can't predict, Dee?
What's that?
So, I'm helping my sister pick a raised bed container. She wants to have something at waist height.
Right.
So we've gone through stock tanks, building something. I've shown her stuff online. You actually sent us a link to another product that's on wheels.
Rolling planters?
Yes. I'm at Sam's Club yesterday, and they had these...
Sam's or Costco?
Sam's Club.
Okay, just making...
Yeah. They had these planters that are almost 4 feet by 18 inches, and they're made out of plastic, looks like wood, and they're very dark, and they have a metal frame. And I thought, that's exactly what she wants.
Good.
So I sent her pictures of it, and I checked it all out. And I must have blanked out because the next thing I know, I had one in my cart, and I bought one for myself.
So you had what we call a gardener blackout, is what you had.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they look pretty nice, and I thought, I really should educate myself on growing in a container like this on a patio so I can help others when they have questions, because I always get questions about planters like this.
Uh-huh.
So, I'm doing it not just for myself, but for others.
You're all about doing for others.
Anyway, I'm going to plant it full of like lettuce and spinach and radishes and try to get those things through the summer sort of in a shaded location, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Great. I love it.
Thanks.
I'm not going to go buy one. I will resist.
Just don't go to Sam's Club. You might have a blackout moment.
I don't know. I like to buy toilet paper at Sam's Club. But anyway, so
don't go down that aisle.
I won't. I will stay far away from it. So what are we going to talk about on our vegetables section as far as what's our topic?
Well, our topic is really working with seedlings inside. And I have another sister that sent me a picture, and she said, here are my seedlings. They're like 6 inches tall. Do I top them off? And I looked at it, and I thought, oh, no. Those don't even have the true leaves yet. It's just the 2 seed leaves. And what it was she had started a bunch of different, mostly tomato plants and other flowers, but she had them in a windowsill, and they just simply did not get enough light.
So they stretched.
And it reminded me, they stretched like nobody's business. Mm-hmm. And so I told her, and this is true, I think, for most people, unless you have a greenhouse, you almost have to provide supplemental light for seedlings started indoors.
I agree.
And it doesn't have to be a fancy, $300 fixture from someplace. You can literally buy a shop light fixture for like $30, and I saw them at Sam's Club with LED fixtures, $30. You don't even have to have the special plant spectrum lights. Just a regular shop light will work.
It works.
You put that as close to the seedlings as you can without actually touching the seedlings, and then leave it on for a long time. Like I will leave mine on for 18 hours a day.
I've left them all 24 hours. It didn't matter. They were fine. And those lights last forever. Like the lights I have, I made a seed starting station out of a rack, like a closet rack is what it is. It's a shelving system. And so we made that a few years ago, and I think it has 5 levels or 4. And those lights, I'm still on the same lights I was on 5 years ago because you only use them for a couple of months.
Right. And I turn mine off sometimes on a timer. I have a timer that'll turn them off like at midnight, and then they're back on at 6 a.m. So that was the first thing. And I thought my sister was a pretty experienced gardener, but I didn't realize she'd never really started seeds indoors.
Yeah, that's the first thing. But you know what? Here's the deal. It's not hard to start seeds indoors, but I think it takes a little practice, before, because different seeds react differently. Tomatoes are pretty easy to start indoors, but like eggplant especially, but tomatoes appreciate it too, so do peppers. A heat pad underneath them on that shelving unit really gets them off to a good start. Right now I have mine sitting on top of the shelf above the heater in the greenhouse. I'm going to see if that works. It may not be enough. I may have to go plug in a heat pad just to give them enough heat on the bottom because they just won't germinate, especially eggplant. So that's something nobody ever knows when they start out. And then, of course, you get them growing. You raise you keep raising your light as you go, right?
Right. Keep raising the light.
As they grow. So you get to the point where it's time to
It's time to take them outside, but you got to do that slowly. You can't raise them inside at 70 degrees with all that light and then one day take them out and put them in the garden. They will
die.
Revolt.
They will die.
They will.
They'll turn up their little roots and die on you. And here's the thing. I think the hardening off process is one of the hardest parts of seed starting because they need to be in a sheltered place, kind of out of the wind. A little wind is fine, but in Oklahoma, there's a lot of wind in the spring, especially. So they've got to be a little wind, right? You want them not in the full sun because your natural tendency would be, I'm going to take those out there and put them in the sunlight, right? No.
You'll burn them.
They'll burn up. You'll come outside and they'll all be white, and they'll just be sad. So put them in the shade.
Make sure they're well watered, too. They'll dry out faster outside.
And start out with about an hour. And bring them back in.
Yes.
And then maybe after a few days, I might leave them out for 2 hours. I mean, it's some work, especially if you start a lot of seeds. Last year, I started tons and tons of seeds, and I'm telling you, hauling those back and forth, that's a lot of work.
I got a great idea, though.
What's that?
You know what? You should go to a garage sale and get an old baby carriage, and then you can put your seedlings in there, and then you can just wheel them in and out in that little carriage.
Or a wagon.
Wheel them in, wheel them out. Yeah, a wagon.
A wagon would work, although I had so many seeds last year. I had 4 shelves full, so there was no wagon.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah. It was kind of dumb, frankly. So I'm not doing that this year. I started a few, but I didn't start that many because I'm only cooking for Bill and me.
Yeah, it's not like you have to have a truck farm going out there, truck garden.
Yeah, used to I did, but not anymore. Less is more.
So I'm just doing about 2 flats worth of seedlings, which is very manageable.
Yep. I think I've got 2 flats.
So that's what we wanted to make sure people knew is you have to have a light source indoors. I don't know anybody that doesn't. You got to gently harden them off, which gently harden. That's weird. You got to gently harden them off. And I said the third thing I would tell people is use a clean tray and new seed starting mix, or you'll end up with damping off, which is a bacterial rot, and your seedlings will look fine one day. The next day you'll go and look, and they'll all be laying on the ground, on the dirt.
Sad.
Roots up, sad, dead.
Yeah,
dead.
They will. That's another way they die off really fast. If you reuse containers, you need to wash them in a soapy 10% bleach solution, which I do sometimes because I save my containers. I do use plastic containers to start my seedlings. Although I love Jiffy pots, it wicks away the moisture too fast for me to get back in there and water. Because that's the other thing we haven't mentioned is even when you're starting them indoors, you really need to check the water. As they grow, they need more water than when they first start. And also when you first start your seeds, cover them with something so you can get that moisture build up, create a greenhouse effect, and then, your seeds will get off to a good start. We've just told you everything to do for seedlings, except for we kind of told it out of order. But you guys will figure it out.
That's right. They'll figure it out.
They're smart.
Yes. We have smart listeners.
Yes, we do. So, you ready to talk about some dirt?
You got some dirt. This is kind of sad dirt. Disturbing dirt.
It is sad dirt.
It's about bees again.
Disturbing.
Tell us about it.
We kind of hinted about it earlier, but here's the dirt. So a 2018 University of Texas at Austin study linked glyphosate to problems with honeybee gut microbiota. And what that means, because I read the whole summary of the study, which was like 3 pages long, is that the microbiota helps bees. It benefits their growth and provides defense against pathogens. So the people in charge of the study said that glyphosate interfered with that. And by interfering with that, it leaves honeybees, more open to colony collapse disorder, which has been this mysterious thing that has been killing honeybees for the past 10 years especially. Now, do they think it's all glyphosate? No. And I have to just say that Bayer, who owns Monsanto, denies the study's findings. Of course they do. They always deny everybody's study's findings. But they did say that it was a small study. It was not a huge study. But here's what we know. We know that glyphosate gets into, they've done a bunch of studies. A bunch of beekeepers have done studies too. And we know that glyphosate is in honey, and it's also in their pollen and in the wax. So we know it gets to them because there's just no way it couldn't, because farmers that use glyphosate spray it on the whole field.
Right. And for listeners who don't know, glyphosate is a broad spectrum herbicide that basically kills any plant that it touches.
Right. And except Roundup Ready crops, which is where the farmers come in. So Roundup Ready crops tend to be like soybeans, corn, wheat, canola. There's some others. And so those crops are sprayed. And that's also an issue with the monarchs too, because what gets killed by what used to grow along the sides of fields?
Milkweed.
Milkweed. Right, milkweed. So when farmers spray their fields with glyphosate or Roundup, it gets rid of all weeds, including milkweed. So there's been a real effort throughout the middle of the United States especially to replant highways and also to encourage farmers to leave some of the milkweed. That's been a huge proponent in Oklahoma, and I'm sure it has been in Indiana too. So anyway, we both talked about this earlier this week, and neither one of us use glyphosate anymore. I mean, I haven't used it for years. You haven't either, right?
No. I swore it off in the last container I think I took to the Toxaway place about 4 years ago.
Yeah, if you use it, and I know a lot of people use it. I don't think that home gardeners are as bad about it as, large scale farming. But the thing is you can't use it if you're a beekeeper. And if you want to attract pollinators, it's probably not good for any of them, frankly. Not just it, but also pesticides. So there was some thought previously that just pesticides hurt pollinators, but now they're finding that some herbicides do too. I am encouraged because this week I saw a new herbicide that was out that has ammonium. I want to say ammonium sulfate in it, but that may be wrong. It's ammonium. So it's like a salt, and I'm going to try it. And it's actually produced by Ortho, and it's OMRI listed. And so we'll talk about that more maybe next week on our dirt.
Yeah, and we'll also put a link to OMRI listed just so give readers a chance to research what that means in terms of listing of pesticides and things.
Right, because pesticides and herbicides both. Yeah, because OMRI listed products, it would be good if you guys go read it for yourself.
Right. I tell people in my talks and stuff, they always want to know how to control weeds, and I keep telling them, just keep pulling them, just keep pulling them. We all go through phases where we think, well, a little Roundup won't hurt, but the weeds come back. Horticultural vinegar is another product that people use. It does not work as an effective weed killer. You'll get top dieback.
Top kill.
But the weeds will come right back, and you're putting a very strong acid into the soil. And the real key, and this is a whole nother podcast episode, the microorganisms in the soil are proven to be so important to the health of the overall garden. Why would you want to pour acid all over them and kill them? Right,
and we can talk about that another time too. One thing I wanted to say is that, if you're going to use any type of herbicide, and there's another one out there that's an oil called Burnout. I used to use it. I just use a few herbicides on my paths, never in the garden itself, just on my paths because I have river rock paths. Now, most of my weeds go away as soon as it gets hot, so I really don't have to do much. But I've used Burnout in the past, and it works, and it makes your garden smell like cloves because it has clove oil. Does it work great? No. There's not much out there that kills the root too.
Yeah, but in those gravel paths, Dee, do you use one of those flame-killing weed things that you just shoot them with fire? Have you done that?
Yes, I have, a lot. Sometimes I spray them with that oil and it kind of kills them, and then, kills them down a little bit, and then I go back, and I don't use one of those flame weeder deals. I actually use a propane torch. But then you're putting out pollution. So the truth is, it's really hard to be a gardener and be green. Like the frog said.
Right. Well, let's end on a high note.
Yes, because that kind of made me depressed. Our dirt this week made me depressed. Sorry.
So on a high note, I want to give a shout out to listeners, maybe new listeners from the Kentuckiana Herb Society down in southeastern Indiana and Kentucky around the Louisville area and New Albany. I was down there this weekend talking to those people. They are lovely, lovely people. And I only bought one plant at the sale.
Wow. How'd you do that?
I was busy speaking and selling books, but there was a beautiful house plant, and I'll have to talk about it next time that I bought.
Oh, cool. Neato. I want to give a shout out too.
Shout out.
On, I think it's April the 10th at 6:30 p.m., I am speaking to the Oklahoma County Master Gardeners as part of their Wednesdays at Will Rogers, and that's at Will Rogers Park. And it's at 6 or 6:30 p.m. Just look it up online. In fact, we'll link to it, just like we're going to link to all of Carol's fun talks, too.
Yes. My next shout out is to the new listeners in Central Indiana. There's a monthly newsletter called Horoscope, which is sent out, and you can find that online and you can subscribe. And it's all the news and happenings in the gardening community around Central Indiana. And they listed our podcast, Dee.
Oh, that's so exciting. Thank you.
Yes, very nice. And one last shout out. This Saturday, I'll be at the Hancock County Library in Greenfield, Indiana for the Hancock County Master Gardeners Program. It's in the morning. And again, you can find the information online. I'll probably have it on my blog, maydreamsgardens.com, in a couple of days to remind folks.
Cool. I love it. So we want to be sure and tell everybody that they can find us almost everywhere. On Instagram, we try to post pictures and information that relates back to the podcast. We're also on iTunes. We are on Google Play. We are on, is it SoundCloud that we're also on?
I think so.
Yeah. So we're everywhere. If you could give us a review, a 5-star review if you like us on iTunes, it really does help us do better and better, and get listened to. The other thing is we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and you can send us questions to all those places, or you can email us at thegardenangelus@gmail.com.
I think you've covered it, Dee.
I think so. Whew.
Woo. So that's it for this week. I hope people have enjoyed it and enjoyed talking across the garden fence with you as always, Dee.
Same here, Carol. Have a great week.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.